Okay, here we are for opportunity predators. So there is a slight difficulty, I suppose, is a good word. It's not the word I was looking for, but it's a good word. Between me and Ruben and Makers Academy saying, get jobs through us, because we do all this work to help you get jobs and all that sort of stuff. But also, I'm now going to give a talk about how you go off and do it by yourself. Because, of course, we want, from my point of view, I want me and Ruben and you to all be contributing to you getting a job. And as I've mentioned over and over, I believe, I would like to see it tested. I believe that if you try and get a job with us, so either one of the jobs that we've got or one of the jobs that you go and find and then you bring and say, help me get this job, that you're more likely to get the job. Just had a chat with Charlie about recruiters. That's something that we should mention is financially, commercially, I don't want you to go through recruiters because I want you to go through me because then we make more money and we continue doing what we're doing. That's actually not a particularly persuasive argument for me or for you. The more persuasive argument and the more interesting one is I don't actually think you're likely to get as good a job going through a recruiter. And that's based on the fact that recruiters tend to be salespeople rather than technologists. Not that I'm a technologist, but I am supported by a company full of technologists. They tend to focus still, even now, even when everybody tells them not to, on keywords. It says Ruby on this side, it says Ruby on this side, it must be a match, when actually we all know that the languages are irrelevant. It's how you approach the problem, and that's the bit that you should be matching on, and culture and all that sort of stuff. And that's a lot of work that we do, particularly the fact that we've got to know you over the last few months, and we then go and get to know the companies, and we can do closer matching like that. Also, recruiters are much more interested in getting you into a high-paid role than a role that is really the best for you. I mean, obviously, their fee requires you to stay there for at least 6 months or 12 months. So they're interested in it being a good match, but from their point of view, they're motivated by their commission, which means obviously the higher salary you get. I don't earn commission. If you get a job at 20 grand, if you get a job at 50 grand, makes no fucking difference to me as long as you're happy. That's the difference. But here is the whole thing about helping you to find jobs. Yeah.
And I've gone through recruiters before, and I find what they used to do to me is they used to oversell me because of making more money. Right. And that was really difficult because I'd end up getting into jobs where I was expected to do all this stuff that theoretically I could do, but practically there was no support either because they were paying me so much for it. So I didn't find that they were really interested in getting me a job that was good. They just wanted me to get this high ticket job whether or not I could do it. And that was
yeah, the whether or not you can do it thing I think is a big deal. Like, for example, a recruiter is never going to say, oh, I'm not going to send you to that company because they don't test drive their code. They're going to send you there.
Or they don't have support for juniors.
Yeah.
And juniors position is unsupported, but it's paying 10 times as much as other junior positions. So.
Precisely, yeah. So in the vein of the session that you missed this morning, I'd like to get an idea of who has done any of this before. What I'm going to be talking about is not just like how to find companies as in, press keys in Google, but like how to find companies that are actually the things that you want to do, how to find jobs that are the sorts of jobs you want to do, how to find the people that you want to work for. So, by a show of hands, who has applied to a job before? Right? Who has applied to more than 10 jobs, as in who has applied for a job more than 10 separate times? No, as in like applied for a job, got one, left a job, applied for a job, got one, and has done that more than 10 times.
Does it count if you didn't get them?
Yeah, okay. And something like, I mean, who's had more than kind of like 2 or 3 different jobs or careers or anything like that? Okay, awesome. So what I'm getting is the idea that a lot of you will have experience of doing these things, but have not necessarily done them very well on the grounds of the fact that you didn't find the thing that you did for the rest of your life. I appreciate that is a massive oversimplification. The stuff that I will say here is as quite a lot of the stuff I say is, idealistic. It is the perfection to strive for, rather than if you're not doing it, you're doing it wrong. It's just the direction to push yourself in to try and get this thing. And of course, there are always going to be pragmatic things that get in the way of achieving any of this. Particularly, I might add, and this is my overarching problem, can't really be bothered to do it. No, wrong button. These are the 3 questions to ask. They are deep questions. Back to the deep questions. And as I was mentioning to Charlie earlier, the reason for asking these deep questions is because the 3 things that motivate us, according to Dan Pink, are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. You have lots of autonomy and mastery because you're a Makers Academy graduate. That's what Makers Academy is all about, is autonomy and mastery. You do it by yourself and you get good at it, and you're on this journey now to master, or at least to get anywhere near some kind of mastery of this thing. But we kind of miss out on the purpose. And this is the purpose. This is the final key to your motivation, to your being brilliant, to your moving further and achieving the things you want to achieve. So what do you want to achieve? Any idea? I mean, like, I hear a lot of people, and this I think is probably quite common for Makers Academy, is I want to make stuff, I want to build things, I want to try and solve this problem, you know, somewhat from scratch or something like that. And what I don't want to do is just sit in a team that's just delivering software that's the same old goddamn software they've been delivering for 10 years and all we're really doing is bug fixing. I imagine if there's anyone in the room who would rather the latter, please raise their hand now. No, good, okay. So more specifically, what do you want to achieve? Questions like, if you manage to do all of the things that you really wanted to do over the next 3 years or something, what would have changed about the world? Do you actually want to change anything about the world, or do you just care about getting better at what you're doing? Would make sense considering the situation you're in right now. Do you just want to get better at what you're doing, and that's what you want to achieve, which might change later down the line? Yeah.
Yeah. So from an employer's perspective, obviously, like, the tech industry is so fluid. It's not anything to stay longer than the first year or 2 years. So like, them asking like a 5-year question, like your actual real answer would be probably something along the lines of, you know, so that's beyond this company. Obviously, do they want to know the sort of real big ambition, or do they want to know something that's kind of a bit more company related, like, you know, basically what's the right answer to that in essence?
Okay, the larger the company is, the more likely their default mindset will be longer term. Mm-hmm. But unless they're blind, they will know that the technology industry is very fluid. Particularly also the fact that, I mean, anyone younger than probably 40 actually most people don't hold jobs for more than 3-5 years, because they go and do something else because it's interesting. Sorry?
It's bored, you know, it's like you are doing the same all the time, and if you stay in that company, you will do more, so yeah. You have to go to another, like, to a big challenge again.
And this is the same in creative industries, which you will likely all go into as well, tech industries, etc. It's very well understood. I was saying earlier that what I would approach that question by saying, by not talking about yourself only. So if they say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Something along the lines of, I see myself contributing to this company contributing to my development to the point where I get promoted, to the point where I can then maybe move into a different company doing something better, or that I can then bring that client back to you. It's a bit of a constructed, shitty answer, but like maybe not quite as shitty as I just did it, maybe a few steps back from that. But the idea is that you're saying that where I see myself in the future is contributing value.
Yeah.
But also having got better, and therefore I'm better at contributing value. What excites you? It's a little tip that I always push on people in interviews: talk about stuff that makes you smile. Because the stuff that makes you smile, funnily enough, makes you smile. And when you smile, people like you more, people trust what you say more, people believe in you more. when you're excited, when you're engaged, when you're enthusiastic, if there is anything that you should desperately try to force in an interview if it doesn't come naturally, it's enthusiasm. And the way to force enthusiasm is to talk about things that you're enthusiastic about and use that as a base. So what excites you? Don't, and like, again, idealistic, don't do things that you don't really love doing. Just don't do them. Don't go into a job and go, oh yeah, well, you know, I really love coding, but you don't code. So I'm going to, what? Why am I here? What? No, but that's an extreme example, obviously, but like, go and do the stuff that you really care about and it really excites you and really interests you. Obviously also apply for jobs that aren't quite so exciting as a safety net in case you don't get the jobs that are really exciting. Don't just discard stuff willy-nilly. Also, going back to a point that Ruben made earlier in the week, you can't reject an offer you don't have, but most importantly from that thing that he says is you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know whether Deloitte Digital is a good place for you to work yet. So pursue that knowledge. Find out whether Deloitte Digital or any of the other companies are things that excite you. And the last one is, who do you know? Much as I would love it not to be the case, the best way of getting a job is through somebody you know. Like me, for example. You know me. Events. So many events. You just go up the road there. I mean, actually even around here, but really around Old Street, I want to test this actually. I genuinely believe that you could, from kind of about 8 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, go to free events where they will provide you with free food and usually free booze. If I am ever up Shit Creek, I know where I will be feeding and watering myself. Throughout the whole day, there are so many events going on that are free or very cheap to enter, where there are collections of people who like the same stuff as you, who like talking about the same stuff as you. Yeah? Oh, yeah. Find these events. They're not difficult to find, you know, Eventbrite, Meetup, etc. Go to them, talk to those people, and don't talk to those people going, hello, I'd like a job, please. Hello, I'd like a job, please. Can I have a job? Can I have a job? No. Go in there and go, hello, you're interesting. Wow, that's fascinating. What do you do? How do you do it? Why do you do it? How can I help? Oh, no, I can't help. That's a shame. But no, you're really cool. I'm going to talk to more. Can I learn more? Can you subscribe me to your newsletter? I want to engage. I want to talk. Because you're there to give. You're not there to get. Give. Give everything away. Give your whole self away, and you might get something back.
I went to a speed mentoring thing this weekend, and one of the women who was quite successful in code said that every job she ever got, she got from Hackathon.
Cool.
And she said that if you were going to do, she said, don't go to recruiters, like, don't even interview. Doesn't matter if you don't know what you're doing, tell them you know at a hackathon, I don't know. And she said, don't worry about it, just go. You spend like an intense 2 days with people so that everybody knows everybody really well, and then everybody knows a job.
Yeah.
And can get it for you. She doesn't have to interview for you.
No, that's awesome. That's really cool. And that we already do hackathons here, as I'm sure you know. We're going to do more and more of them, and that's actually quite nice. I might try and focus that into stuff that we do, like try and get the right people at the hackathons. That's really cool. Also, by the way, does anyone know what Artemis is? Anybody? It's a game? No? Okay, look it up. That's just Trek simulator, maybe? Basically, you all sit around. There's a projector on the wall, which is the screen looking out into space, and you all sit around with your computers, and it simulates, and you have to, like, there's a captain, and you have to shout at each other to do stuff. So I was going to host one of those games here, because, oh God. While I'm here, I should also admit that I play Magic the Gathering and various other things. Anyway, yeah. So yeah. So, your network, next point. Your network's actually really interesting. you really, unless you've done the sorts of things that I've done, which I wouldn't recommend, they're massively introspective, you have no idea how valuable your network is until you push, until you try. Try this. Write one sentence that describes what you are, what your value is to a company, and then one sentence that describes the sort of opportunity that you'd like, and then ask every single one of your Facebook friends if they know of or could introduce you to that sort of an opportunity. See what happens. I mean, do it with your LinkedIn, but the point is your Facebook friends are supposedly closer friends. They're more likely to help you. So start with the Facebook and just see what happens. And Paul, so please report back to me to see what happens, because I've only ever done it for myself, and I've told lots of people, here's an idea, go and do it, and no one's ever come back to me and told me whether it worked or not. So if you do it, please tell me if it works. But your network, again, it's that thing of recognizing the fact that one person that you know, that's not one person that you know, that's all the people they know. That's the connection that you've got. So every time you meet one person, you're actually meeting hundreds of people, potentially. Particularly with networking, which in the weekly Wednesday workshops, it will be one of the next sessions that I suggest. And if people would like a session on networking and so on, I'll gladly run one, particularly more as a workshop rather than a talk. One of the keys for me, like they call it a networking hack. I hate that sentence. I should stop using it. Is when you're talking to someone, you're getting on well and you're having a good conversation, is you try and wrap that conversation up by saying, who else should I be talking to about this? So not only have you met one person and the hundreds of people that they know, but they're now just about to introduce you to, which will actually therefore likely be stronger connections than the guy you just met or the girl that you just met at a party. They will now introduce you to 1, 2, 3, perhaps even 4 people in the hundreds of people that they know, but those people are specifically been introduced to you because of the subject matter of the conversation that you were having, which means it's no longer a random meeting, it's now actually a very focused meeting. And when you meet those people, you ask them, who should I be talking to about this, and so on and so on and so on. The Web2Net, I've heard it's very useful. Kind of need to know what you're looking for. That's one of the disadvantages of Google. Google doesn't know what you're looking for. They used to have this thing called the semantic web, which is having a bit of a resurgence now. But before Google came along, what all of the clever people were trying to do was to take all of the meaning that was on the internet and like link it together so that meaning went to meaning rather than just words went to words. And then Google came along and went, no. You give me some words and I will give you 1.6 billion answers. And thus the semantic web died for a bit. Yeah, so you need to know what you're looking for. But things I would recommend are the stuff that you are already interested in. Keep an eye out for companies. Keep an eye out for companies that have recently raised money. That's obvious, really, but worth saying.
How do you find out about companies that have recently raised money?
Read the tech press. So Tech City News, actually no, Tech City News should be lower down that list. TechCrunch, particularly their database of tech companies and the money that they've raised, which is called Crunchbase. TechCrunch, everyone should read it. You know, it's like if you don't know the content of TechCrunch, it's kind of it's a bit of a red flag, I think. I paused halfway through that, realizing I haven't read TechCrunch for ages. Crunchbase, then there's AngelList, which is angel.co. That's more Silicon Valley focused, but it's very interesting. But more importantly, I think, is that the stuff that you're already reading, just look out for company names, because then, and it's another little trick, like every time you ever interact with a product or service, just stop for half a second to think whether you'd like to work for them. You suddenly realize how many jobs there are. Anyone take a guess at how many businesses there are in the UK? You're taking a very long time to guess.
50 million.
Slightly less.
2 million.
Slightly more.
10 million.
5 million. 5 million is the right answer. How many of them what percentage of the 5 million businesses in the UK have fewer than 10 employees?
72.
Most of them.
No, it's 95%. 95% of companies in the UK have fewer than 10 employees. Small businesses account for 60% of the workforce. And when we think about jobs, we think about the names of the companies that we recognize and so on. We think about these big businesses, but actually that's not very many jobs there. The jobs come from the small businesses, particularly the new jobs, particularly the job that technically doesn't actually exist at the moment, but you go and approach them and say, hey, I'm doing this really cool stuff, I can help contribute, and then they create a job for you. There are jobs there as well. So there's lots more jobs than you actually think there are, particularly tech jobs, particularly junior tech jobs, because no one can actually afford senior tech people. There are so many jobs. And then, of course, there's me, and by me, I mean Makers Academy and me and Ruben and all of the work that we do to find all these jobs. On this last point, I will implore you, please, to do my job for me, because then I can spend more time doing the rest of my job, which helps you. The last bit there is important, because if you want to work for a company and we don't have that company on our books, it helps both of us for you to tell us about that, because I can approach the company, bearing in mind that Ruben has more than 2 years experience of persuading companies to hire Makers graduates, because it's unusual, it's a thing that people need persuading with, but also I've now inherited that and contributed to it. Ruben and I are very, very good at persuading people to hire Makers graduates. While I'm sure that a lot of you are extremely capable of doing that by yourself, there is this resource that you can use to help you to get someone turned around to the idea of hiring a Makers graduate. It also then means that they're on our books, which then means that we can send other Makers graduates later down the line. You can mentor them, thus the cycle continues, and we all have one big happy family. So please bring the companies that you want to work for back to us. And as I mentioned before, we might either say, actually, we already know them. Like I think I mentioned to you, I know the founders of Coding Cupboard and High Skill Pro, which the only reason why I know the companies is because I know the founders. And it's that kind of weird thing. So yeah, do that. So I mentioned this before, but this is the sort of the foundation of this whole thing, is the going and looking bit. The easiest and best way, I think, to go and look rather than Google is to ask people, because people have focused knowledge and Google sends you cleverly narrowed knowledge, but not quite focused knowledge. So ask everyone you meet, everyone you know, everybody to help you. And one of the ways you do that is to have 3 questions. 3 things that you want to know the answer to. Now, this might change all the time, but have 3 prepared questions so that any opportunity, whether it's standing in the queue in a coffee shop in Old Street, whether it's at a dinner party, whether it's at El Rug, or whatever situation you're in, you can grasp hold of the opportunity and you can ask those 3 questions that you need to know the answer to. Now, those questions could be about jobs, they could be about a particular bit of tech, they could be about interview technique, they could be about anything you want. But you have those 3 questions and you start to gather information. And as you start to gather information, you put yourself in a much better situation of getting a job. Give things away, I mentioned this before, give. There's a wonderful story which is obviously way bigger than we can ever hope to achieve as mere mortals. But there was a guy in Silicon Valley who graduated from university, and he went around giving away his ideas. So every company that he engaged, product that he engaged with, he'd send them a letter or an email saying how he would improve their product or how they could improve their product. And to the point where he was sending emails to startups saying, this is how I'd improve your business model, etc. He just kept giving these ideas away until eventually a recently funded company, he sent them a thing saying, that I think, here's an alternative business model to consider. They thought it was this exceptionally brilliant idea. And this guy's like 21 or something. They hired him at 150 grand a year to be their business strategist, because he just gave it away. That's an extreme, obviously. But approach all interactions with the primary thought of what can I give to this interaction. Talking about networking, my idea of what networking should be, rather than the horrible, dirty word that it is, networking should be seeking people out, being excited about what they do, and seeing how you can help. And that is a really nice way of engaging with people. I don't know why I hashtagged this. But it's the same. It's this, going back to Sam's whole thing of knowledge predator, and that's why I call this opportunity predator, is because it's the same idea, is seek out this information, mostly by asking people, but also by reading a lot. And, Spike, I think it's tomorrow, will give a session on the sort of things to be reading, the sort of things to be engaging in, whether it's books or Hacker News or TechCrunch or whatever, that just fill yourself with knowledge. Because this might seem trivial, but the more knowledge you have, the better you can put different separate things together. So you're better at making connections and finding opportunities. I mentioned that recruiters are slave traders. I hate them. You'll be better off with us. Seems like I've said all this before. So yeah, now this is the bit where you say stuff. You don't have anything prepared?
I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
And that's, would it be a good idea for us to go and get business cards that have a GitHub thing on other stuff? But because when I have networked people and I have met people, it's been this whole kind of awkward, I'll just put my details in your phone, and then you wonder whether they'll ever actually look through their phone and find your details or anything.
I did an experiment last year. I got 100 business cards of one color printed and 100 business cards of another color printed. And on the ones with one color, I had a slightly different email address. And the color was for me. But the idea was that I would hand out one color if they didn't ask me for my business card. I would hand out the other color if they did ask me for my business card. And of the ones that I handed out where they never asked me for the business card, I literally got 0 response rate. And of the ones that I handed out where they'd asked me for it, it was more like 30%. Now, I later realized, of course, that the color could have been influencing that decision, but it's not a particularly scientific experiment. But that was 100 cards each, and I got 30 responses from one and 0 responses from another. The reason why I mentioned that in preface to answering your question is just basically don't give your contact details out unless somebody asks. However, there is the sense in which you go, I want to follow up on this opportunity. And so there are kind of sales techniques, so the sales techniques is the wrong word, but it's the idea of a commitment to something else. And I think actually that the exchange of contact details isn't a commitment. So organizing something at that time that you're going to do together again, obviously you need to exchange contact details in order to do that, but start with what's the next step, what's the commitment? Oh, let's go for coffee and talk more about this. That's, I think, a better thing to do than exchanging details. Should you try
in that situation to actually arrange dates rather than doing it by email?
No, what I mean is get the commitment to the next thing, then you have a reason to exchange details, and then that means it's more likely that the details, that actual exchange will happen. Whether you do that with a business card or elsewise, I don't think it makes any difference. You are memorable by the fact that you didn't have a business card. But there's also advantages to that, which is if you don't have a business card, that means I have to send you an email right now. I've sent you an email. You've now got the email right in front of you. It all happened. It's all it's like this kind of social contract that is now between us, which is this thing has already happened. rather than this kind of quite distant, like giving you a card exchange thing, which isn't really a commitment. Yeah.
I always just ask for the cards. Maybe that's really American. People like forgive me because I'm American. But what I did that was really helpful, I don't know if it'll be as helpful for this because it's a more in-demand skill set, but we used to do informational interviews. I don't know if you've heard of those.
Coming to that later.
Yeah, and we used to have a list. So I would ask everybody for the card everywhere I went, and then we'd have a list, an ongoing list of people, and I'd make myself, even though I sweat through shirts doing it, actually call 5 people every day, just to see if they were available for a coffee, if I could go see them. And if you start asking everybody you meet for a card, that list of people you have to call just grows.
Yeah.
And it only took me a couple of days to find instead of going for an interview.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry, yeah. No, I was thinking in terms of the if they don't ask you for details.
No, I mean I would just go anywhere and just say.
But that's you pulling stuff in. Yeah, definitely.
Contact you, and I would just.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right there. Is pulling that in, and because I know I do this all the time, which is you assume you know how useful somebody is. Well, actually, you're probably wrong. And it's only really by getting to know them that you start to understand how useful they might be to you. And then, of course, they might be actually useful for you 3 months down the line rather than right then. Yeah, definitely pull in as much as you can. And on the point of calling out and informational interviews, I'll cover it a little bit more later. But the thing I really like about that is that it goes back to this giving thing. Is you don't call them up and say, "Hey, I really like a job with you." You call them up and say, "Hey, I'd really like to find out more about what you do." And there's the old adage of if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. And the same kind of goes with jobs. If you start asking people for jobs, they shut down. They go, "Oh no, we're not hiring at the moment," or "Oh yeah, now I've got to offend you by saying no." Whereas if you talk to them and engage them and make it sure that it's their idea that they want to hire you, then that's a much lower barrier to there's a much the barrier drops basically. Any other people's experiences about this sort of thing, stuff that they found really works or doesn't work?
Yeah, I went to the hackathon a few weeks ago. Had a really great time. Got some really good mentoring, met some great people. One of them invited me to their wedding soon.
You work fast.
To go in the coming weeks. I don't know, thank you.
What about the
Sorry? Yeah. So if anyone wants to go to the hackathon, I'll go.
Cool.
So on that note, there's one other. And then also, so follow up is always like a good one as well. Make sure you follow up if you've had a good conversation with them. Just follow up on what you mentioned.
There's something that I do with meetings, which is I send a summary of the meeting to the person that I had a meeting with, where specifically it's I make sure that I word the summary of the meeting very much more in my favor than the meeting actually went, with the thing at the top saying, please add or change anything as you see fit. And no one yet has ever added or changed anything as they saw fit. Obviously include actions, but most importantly, particularly with somebody that you've just met, the commitment to the next step is something that you should push for. And there's a very, very, very good reason for that. Because if they say no to the commitment to the next step at that point, they were always going to be a waste of time. All that would have happened is that you would have exchanged contact details, you would have followed up with them, they would have never replied to you, you would have then sent them another email, and then they would have never replied to you, or they might have replied to you saying, actually I'd really rather you didn't contact me anymore. Whereas if you're in the presence of meeting them right at that point and you say, hey, let's something, and they say no, great, that's no, you're not going to waste your time with those people. So push for the next step when you're with somebody. Obviously, don't be shitty about it. Oh, let's go for coffee. No, I don't want to. No, let's go for coffee. Oh, it's been really great. Yeah, but really enjoyed meeting you. No, it's not. Don't push too hard. Like just engage with the next one. Anything else? Any horror stories about trying and finding companies, getting the wrong information, the wrong end of the stick about a company. Because the other thing is, I mentioned at the beginning of this, which is finding companies and their opportunities. Is that we sort of feel like opportunities are somewhat set in stone, and they're really not. Does anybody know what the percentage of jobs in the UK that are advertised? It's 15%.
Really?
Yeah. Now there is a skew towards entry-level jobs, junior jobs are more likely to be advertised, but overall, of all jobs that are out there, they're filled before they're ever advertised, most of them.
That's through referral as well.
Through referral, through the fact that you know that there's someone leaving that company, so you've stepped in and said, actually, I can fill that space before they've even left. So the job actually isn't ever actually open. You just fill it.
Or jobs get created based on somebody's, so you show up and say, I could do this for you.
Yeah.
Also, there's some jobs.
And that's my favorite one, is to create your own job. This would probably be more appropriate for you guys having done one job and going into the second one. But just go and talk to people and this, I can do this for you. And they may well go, actually, you know what, we really need one of those, and they'll create a job for you. Oops, no, that one. Just want to check to see where we are at 12 o'clock. Oh God, that's gone on for ages. I've gone way over. I was going to talk about preparing an application. How do I summarize that? Informational interviews, very important. Find out as much about the company as you possibly can, but also obviously, as was mentioned, it's fantastic for building your network. The way that works is you go and find somebody who works at a company that you're interested in or does a job that you're interested in. You invite them out, either on the telephone or go and meet them for coffee or something, and you just mine them for information. So that's really useful for you anyway, but it's also quite nice when you call the HR person at the company that you've applied to say, did you receive my application? Then you have a bit of a conversation with them. You say, I had some questions about the job description. And then you mention the fact that you met Joe from accounting. You say, because Joe said such and such when I saw him recently. Oh, which Joe? Oh, Joe from accounting. Oh, blah, blah, blah. So then it sounds like you've got friends and you have a connection, and then suddenly you stop being just a name on a piece of paper and you start being a human being, and human beings are more likely to get jobs. That's informational interviews in a nutshell. Then there's also don't apply for 500 jobs in 500 hours. Apply for 5 jobs in 500 hours. Put a lot of effort into the one job that you apply for, rather than putting minimal effort into applying for lots and lots and lots of jobs. You probably will get a job by putting minimal effort into applying for lots and lots and lots of jobs. You probably will actually get more than one job or more than one offer. The question really is around whether they're the right one, because the amount of effort that you put into applying for a job, obviously, it helps you. That's kind of it. I mean, unless there's any other stuff, you should go and get lunch and bring it back, because the man from moo.com is going to be here, and
It's 12:30.
12:30 he starts, yeah.
Yeah, I got a